The story begins in a cave where light can be seen from outside and introduces that it was the story of Demon King, one of the 72 demons tasked with destroying the human world. The place was full of human bodies. Only those who passed the Great Demon King Astrea could have that title, and each Demon King was granted an extraordinary power by the Great Demon King Astrea. Inside the place, two people appeared and seemed like they were talking to each other. A man was seated on the couch while the woman stood by the man's side. The man uttered that he was no exception and looked at his hands and was spectating it intently. As he faced down, he mumbled Lilith. It was a woman named. Lilith answered her as she heard the Demon King call her name. The Demon King was deep in thought. He was facepalm and asked the woman what power he was granted. Lilith placed her hand on her chest, bowed, and answered the Demon King Karos that it was Gacha. The Demon King repeatedly said that it was a Gacha. He seems annoyed by his power because it doesn't make sense for a Demon King's power to be Gacha for him, since it's neither immense nor able to control elements at will. He whined and fussed about his power since it does not grant infinite knowledge. The woman calmed her down because the Great Demon King was listening. Karos, the Demon King, was still ranting and said that he could not imagine if he had descended before humans as a Demon King. But his power was simply Gacha. He then imagined things, such as when a hero faced him, where the place was chaotic, volcanoes erupting, rocks falling, and the ground almost collapsing. A man with a dark aura appeared flying in the sky, looking down at the man down to him who was holding a sword. For the Demon King, it was embarrassing. Would it have been if his power was Gacha? He also imagined he was attacking his opponent. The hero would laugh at him because of his power was just a Gacha. As he finished imagining things, he turned to Lilith and asked the woman if he could change his power. He was hoping for a change. However, her secretary was apologizing to him. Lilith imagined the face of the Great Demon King and she explained that the power designated by the Great Demon King cannot be changed or removed. The latter still won't budge and asked about adding another power. He gets answered by Lilith by saying that still wasn't possible. The latter said it was too much for him. He whined at Lilith and he doubted himself on how he supposed could rule the world with Gacha. He didn't know whether the Gacha was power or just luck. When the latter was still complaining to her secretary, she gave a friendly reminder to him that he should refrain from bad-mouthing the Great Demon King. The latter retorted that he had plenty of reasons to complain. He then imagined the face of the Great Demon, and Lilith said to her that the Great Demon King said to the latter that once bad-mouthed the Great King once again, then he would be eliminated. By that, the protagonist started to shiver and stopped talking. Despite being scared, the latter kept protesting that the other Demon Kings had received normal abilities for him. So why was he the only one who received the power of Gacha? Lilith answered and said that was because the Great Demon King had become addicted to a game from another human world. It was the one involving probability. The protagonist facepalms and caresses his head as if he heard the woman right. Her secretary continued to explain that there was a rumor that the Great Demon King managed to become a rank 1 thanks to his Gacha skills. The overall server ranking of the Great Demon King shows that he ranks 1 in that game. Karos wasn't satisfied and seemed uninterested in what he heard from her secretary. Therefore, her secretary held the latter's shoulder and tapped him to persuade him that becoming a rank 1 is something to celebrate. He doesn't think it makes sense, as he gave up and stated that he should at least try using his power. Her secretary has already supported his decision, and she will take action immediately. On the Demon King's feet, a circulating yellow air came through his feet. As the yellow air evolved, there were multiple boxes with many seeming dots inside. The latter asked if it was his power. When a large box came through his face, her secretary ordered that he should have opened the box. The Great Demon agreed and answered her back by saying all right. He uttered that he wanted to make some magical ability, or perhaps even a dragon may come out. As he was hoping for a powerful thing inside the box, it released a tiny green something that had a face on it that made the latter freeze on what he saw. The creature was lying down on the head of the Demon King, and her secretary was surprised and told him to open another box. As they kept opening the box, it was the same creature with many different colors that were happily attached to his body. He has a total of 5 little creatures on his body. That made him mad at the situation that he had at that moment. Lilith reminded him that there was still 1 random box left. The only left box seemed to have a powerful thing inside because a yellow thing surrounded the box. The protagonist proceeded to open and wanted to know what would come out. He placed his point finger on the box and was surprised by what he saw on the box. He was looking at it intently. A sleeping woman is released inside the box, surrounded by a purple aura. The Demon King went to Lilith and shook her hard because he was angry at what he received in the box. He said it was just a young succubus who hadn't even had her coming-of-age ceremony yet, and she didn't have any power. Despite being shaken by his master, she congratulated him for not being another slime. The protagonist became more agitated. He then said to Lilith he didn't work his butt off at the academy for those he receives and talked about his power. Lilith told him that since it had already been decided, there was no way to change it. He then walked out angrily. However, her secretary was stopped by the Demon King because the latter said there was a way and smiled at her. The secretary was surprised and taken aback when he saw her master's smile. When the Demon King walked, he said demons are constantly struggling creatures. The latter continued and encouraged himself to always strive to become stronger. As the latter walked, he ordered Lilith to open the gate. He was determined to confront the Great Demon King by himself. On their way, the outside was filled with lightning and was dark red. It signifies that the place was full of death, darkness, and shadow. 3 people were inside as they arrived at the front of Demon King Astrea's office. When Karos and Lilith walk in the hallway, the protagonist is surprised by the purple thing that explodes. He faced his back and wasn't expecting that, so he cursed. A woman throws a purple thing at him and murmurs that they have finally met. She stands firm while her power is released, seemingly angry at the latter. The latter wasn't hoping that they shouldn't meet and then yelled that they should not do it in the castle of the Great Demon King. At the same time, the woman with the purple thing was preparing to attack the latter, and she yelled at the latter to shut up. She looks like she is holding a grudge against the protagonist because she uttered that with what the latter did, even turning him into dust wouldn't be enough. The latter senses that the agitated woman cannot be stopped, and he finds it troublesome. The woman who was angry at her had released her powers on both of her hands. The latter told the woman that her temper was the same as ever. However, demons inside the castle were scared and screaming because the demon kings were fighting. The woman screamed and said that the latter should die and launched her power on the ground and making the rocks overflow. The latter was dragged by Lilith and said that it was dangerous. The angry woman kept launching his power and shouted that she would fry the protagonist. Someone held a chair, and it was Lilith. She threw the chair to have it defend against the woman's attack, which made the woman angrier. The latter's secretary faced the angry woman and calmed her down because the place was sacred, where they waited to meet the Great Demon King. However, the angry woman could not be stopped and insisted on killing the Demon King and that everything would be settled automatically. She ordered Lilith to get out of her way and attack her with the purple thing directly where the body of Lilith was. Lilith was hit by the attack of the angry woman, which made the woman spurt and cough with blood. She plunged and hit the wall. The latter, who watched the situation, mumbled Lilith's name. Lilith stated that she was the secretary serving the Demon King Karos. As she stood up and placed her fist on her chest, she was mad and continued that if her lord got hurt, the reason for her existence would vanish. Therefore, she must protect the lord all her life. However, the angry woman said, "Is that so?" and smiled while she released her power, saying she would eliminate them together. The Demon King, watching the 2 women release their powers, interrupted and called Beatrice an angry woman. He knows that Beatrice has something against him. He persuaded the woman that they should not do it inside the castle because the Great Demon King would punish them. Beatrice closes his fist and shows it to the latter, making him shut up. The woman would still eliminate him even if she got punished by the Great Demon King. Karos was watching the 2 and thought that he would lose if he fought Beatrice at that moment. The latter stood there, watching Lilith and Beatrice collide with their released power. He also thought that no matter what he was also the Demon King. He clenched his fist because he thought it was seriously a disgrace. In the grand, luxurious, decorated hall, Lilith's face contorted in a mix of anger and bewilderment. She raises a gloved hand. She demands and says, "Just what the hell are you?" In a dramatic flash, the angry woman has fierce authority. She stands tall, clad in a striking red outfit that signifies her power and status. As she raises her hand, she declares that she is the ruler who reigns over 1/10 of the earthly realm. She introduces herself with a commanding presence and says she is Beatrice Confrescia. Lilith is shocked as she utters the name of Beatrice and realizes that Beatrice is one of the 4 rulers. There were a total of 72 demon kings, however, half of the world was ruled by only 4 people. They were Capiria Bordos, the demon king of despair and grief, Rubernium Almas, the demon king of dejection and sorrow, Soracross, the demon king of joy and madness, and finally, Beatrice Confrescia, the demon king of screams and rage. Lilith was still in disbelief as she never imagined seeing one of the 4 demon kings, and she even thought it was just her luck. Beatrice casts her magic power, surrounding a swirling storm of lighting. Beatrice concludes that even if Lilith narrowly escaped earlier this time, she would still die. While activating her magic power, the ground beneath trembles and shatters. The scene erupts with an intense, blinding blue light emanating from Beatrice at the center of the chaos. She is determined and screams, "Die." Her power was aimed directly at Lilith, a power that destroys everything in its path. Karos runs toward Lilith and says, "Watch out." Karos protects Lilith from the impending danger. The atmosphere is charged with a bright blue energy in the next moment. It fills the air with a menacing glow. As the blinding blue light subsides, Karos holds Lilith protectively in his arms, and the magic power Beatrice casts ends up hitting the back of Karos. Beatrice was shocked to see Karos still unharmed after receiving her powerful attack. She can't even utter a word. Karos still wrapped Lilith in his arms. The moment Lilith felt that she was safe, she slowly opened her eyes and held the shoulder of Karos while saying that it was a magic nullification. "How are you alive?" Beatrice asked angrily while pointing her index finger to Karos. Karos was also confused, and he replied that he was curious why he was unharmed, knowing that Beatrice casts a dominant power that should probably kill him. Lilith, who was also confused, said that magic nullification is an ability the Great Demon King possessed a long time ago, and this time she wondered why Karos had it. Suddenly, in a dark, foreboding corridor, the sound of hurried footsteps echoes through the hallway. A figure cloaked in darkness, exuding an ominous aura, dashes through the corridor. This unknown guy said that he heard a noise coming from the waiting room, so he came out to take a look. It turned out that it was the Great Demon King. "You seemed like you were having fun," he uttered with his wide grin revealing sharp teeth. Both Beatrice and Karos laughed with a mix of cheerfulness and sarcasm. The scene shifted to the waiting room, luxuriously decorated with a vast, round table at its center. The Great Demon King, now seated at the head of the table, Karos sat across from him, his gaze steady and serious, contrasting sharply with the Great Demon King. The Great Demon King finally broke the silence by saying, "So, firstly, why are you here to meet me?" Karos then told the Great Demon King that no matter how much he thinks about it, he believes there's a problem with his power. Beatrice drank a wine while thinking that Karos was such a crazy guy, just like what she expected. Karos then honestly said that he had defeated numerous demon kings until now, but he hadn't seen a demon king whose power was Gacha. Beatrice spat out her drink in shock, unable to believe what she had just heard. "The Gacha," she thought in her mind, reeling. Karos, noticing Beatrice's reaction, pointed at her as she coughed and sputtered, struggling to recover from her surprise. Karos said in his voice, tinged with embarrassment and sadness, "That's the typical response he will get when people find out his power is Gacha." He looked embarrassed and on the verge of tears. He continued to explain that his power wasn't great for instilling fear since obtaining a random box was too complicated, plus the probabilities were too erratic. The Great Demon King was intrigued and leaned forward slightly, his interest evident. "So, you want to change your power?" the Great Demon King asked. Karos, with a hint of hope in his voice, answered affirmatively. "Yes, that's right," he said. However, the Great Demon King casually took a sip of his drink and refused. Karos was shocked, questioning the Great Demon King about why. The Great Demon King, crossing his legs and extending his hands. The king laughed and said that he was too bored right now and he thought it would be fun to watch Karos playing Gacha. Enraged by this response, Karos stood up and said, "How can you give me such an ability just for fun?" He was so mad as he felt like the Great Demon King was teasing him. The Great Demon King, still smiling, raised a finger and suggested he could offer Karos something else. Now curious and hopeful, Karos placed his hand on the table and leaned forward. "Something else?" he asked. Beatrice, sensing the gravity of the situation, adopted a serious expression, her previous shock replaced by concern. The Great Demon King switched to a more serious tone. He addressed Beatrice directly, calling her by her title, the Demon King of Screams and Rage. Beatrice, startled and fearful, stood up as she answered, "Yes." The Great Demon King unleashed his power, which swirled around her in black and violet hues. Anger etched on his face, he reprimanded Beatrice for disgracing him in his office, stating that he hadn't given her power for such misuse. The powerful energy enveloped Beatrice, lifting her into the air like a tornado. Terrified, she apologized, her voice trembling. With a tightening gesture, he constricted the tornado around Beatrice, then began to strangle her while proclaiming that Beatrice deserved to die for what she did earlier. Beatrice coughed and begged for mercy. After a tense moment, the Great Demon King released her, declaring that from this moment on, she was stripped of her title as Demon King. Beatrice fell to the ground, gasping for breath, struggling to recover from being choked. The Great Demon King then announced that a substitute would take over Beatrice's position. "From now on, you will become a subordinate of Karos, the Demon King of Madness and Greed, and follow his orders," the Great Demon King stated while pointing his finger at Karos. Both Karos and Beatrice were shocked upon hearing what the Great Demon King just declared. Looking pleased with himself, the Great Demon King assumed neither had any complaints. From behind the closed doors of the waiting room, the responses of the two could be heard as they shouted in disbelief, "What?" The next day, Karos was snoring. He then suddenly opened his eyes and immediately got up. By that, he saw Beatrice stood and waited for him in the corner while holding the yellow and green slimes. The protagonist couldn't believe what just happened and muttered, "No way." However, Beatrice heard him gasping and worried, then presented her feet, was about to kick Karos, and said what he meant by "no way." The woman got agitated and couldn't accept that while Lilith was behind her, stopping her from kicking their master. She screamed that she couldn't accept it, and Lilith was trying her best to not let go of the furious Beatrice while asking her to calm down. Beatrice then said once again that she could not accept it. Karos then thinks that Beatrice still holds a grudge against him. As Beatrice finished with her tantrums, she just sat and asked Karos how they could live together. On the other hand, Lilith said they couldn't overturn the Great Demon King's decision and awkwardly laughed. When Karos and Beatrice glared at each other, Lilith broke their silence by telling Beatrice to decide on her room first. As per Lilith, they were in the Demon King's bedroom and office. As the secretary continued, she pinpointed the bedroom and the room connected below was for Beatrice. A room that had huge windows was their attic and was used by the slimes and succubus. By that, succubus appeared and screamed Demon King with excitement. She happily jumped on Karos, and that made Karos panicked. Succubus successfully embraced him with her breast positioned exactly at the face of Karos, making him almost stumble and groan like an old man. After the incident, she held her master's hair, but Karos let her, and it seemed like he lost all of his energy. Lilith stated that it seemed like Succubus had finally woken up. The succubus was smiling while claiming that she liked Karos as the Demon King. Karos was a little bit annoyed asking about the behavior shown by the succubus, and he asked why she suddenly acted in that way. Lilith explained that all the monsters from Gacha were subservient to the Demon King. As Lilith explained, the green and the pink slimes approached the feet of their master, and Karos realized why the succubus and slimes were too clingy to him. The green slime, who almost approached the latter, was kicked by Karos while asking about their abilities. Succubus interrupted and enthusiastically screamed, "None." She then proceeded to munch Karos' hair. Her answer got the protagonist dumbfounded. Since the succubus ate the hair of Karos, Karos' scalp became red due to the pain. He almost cried and reminded the succubus that she should not eat his hair. Karos remembered something and turned to Beatrice. He grinned at Beatrice and said, "You said you must obey me, didn't you?" By that, Beatrice was startled when Karos remembered what she stated. After a week, still in the same place, under the luminous glow of the full moon, the Demon King Karos' castle stood as a foreboding silhouette against the starry sky. Karos was relaxing in his office with his feet on his desk. He turned to Lilith, who held a red folder, and asked about Beatrice's activities. "She's been quiet for a week now," Karos said while looking intently at Lilith. Lilith reassured him that if he were talking about Beatrice, there would be no need to worry since Beatrice was having fun playing with the succubus and slimes. Lilith saw Beatrice happily bouncing on a slime while another slime, held by the succubus, flew around. Karos, picturing Beatrice's joyful face, remarked that he thought dealing with her would be a hassle. But surprisingly, they get along well since their mental ages are quite similar. Karos then became serious, crossing his arms and tapping his finger against his arm. "What's the current situation?" he asked. Lilith reported that they had already set up double barriers, so there was no risk of being discovered by the villagers for now. "That's a relief," Karos uttered. There are currently 72 Demon Kings on the surface, but over 30% have been taken down by curious human adventurers. These adventurers, driven by courage, greed, and curiosity, had proven to be a formidable force against the demonic realms. Initially, Karos had to completely conceal the Demon King's castle, which is so near yet far from the human village. But now, it's about time to head out. "To grow our power, we need to hunt monsters," Karos stated. With a decisive moment, Karos straightened up in his chair, placing one hand on the armrest while crossing his legs. Karos directed his gaze toward Lilith and ordered her to tell him about the monster habitats nearby. Ever efficient and prepared, Lilith opened her red folder and provided the detailed information Karos sought. Lilith then replied that there were 4 in total near them. The closest is a goblin camp with about 300 goblins. Goblins of all sizes and shapes are busy making simple weapons, cooking over open fires, and playing games. The camp has a rough wooden fence and a simple gate guarded by alert goblins. There are tents and small huts, with a bigger central tent showing where the leader lives. A bit farther away is the orcs' territory, which has around 500 orcs. The orcs' area is a tough encampment in the hills. Large bonfires light up the place. The orcs live in big, strong huts made of logs and stones. There was also an ogre's cave in the nearby forest, but it only had one hibernating ogre. The last one is shrouded in mystery. Something is in the forest, but they haven't identified it yet. Lilith looked down and asked Karos which they should head first. Karos, contemplating seriously with his hand on his chin, suddenly stood up, convinced that they would start with the goblin camp. Lilith, startled by his sudden action, nodded and said she understood. She then remembered something and mentioned that there was also a mission. If they successfully conquer the goblin's habitat, Karos will receive 2 random boxes as a reward. With a confident face, Karos said that maybe he'll get something good this time. Karos led the way in the fields of tall grasses, and Beatrice followed. The great Beatrice, who once ruled the 10th continent, now fights goblins as his subordinate. Beatrice complains while walking through the tall grass. "Just be quiet and follow me," Karos responded. Beatrice crossed her arms and declared to him that she would handle it, and she wanted Karos not to go messing around. In front of Beatrice, Karos let her run her mouth and ignored her. Suddenly, Beatrice ran ahead of Karos. Karos shouted to Beatrice, commanding her not to run ahead, but the lady won't listen. After a few minutes, they reached the entrance of the goblin camp. He hadn't expected so many goblins and saw them outside the gate. Hiding in the tall bushes, they observed 4 goblins at the gate, 1 playing ball, 2 guards, and 1 moving a cart full of things. Karos asked Beatrice what they should do. But when he didn't get a response, he turned to see Beatrice, but he was shocked when Beatrice disappeared beside him, as it turned out that she stood boldly in front of the goblins. She shouted to listen to her. The goblins noticed her immediately. Beatrice introduced herself as the former Demon King, Beatrice Confrescia, and commanded them to bow down and pledge their loyalty to Karos and her. Karos, hiding in the bushes, couldn't believe what she did. The goblin camp gate opened, and more goblins surrounded them. Karos thought this was bad, estimating at least 500 goblins would appear. A goblin with a cloak and wand, looking dangerous, appeared behind Karos, and Karos was panicking, thinking about what to do at this rate. Surprisingly, this goblin bowed, saying that they would pledge their loyalty to Karos. Karos was shocked as all the goblins followed. Beatrice, feeling almighty, laughed and said submitting to them was a wise decision. Karos was puzzled as he never thought getting the monster's loyalty would be this easy. Inside the goblin camp, a feast was prepared with fine dining. Beatrice raised her glass, swirling the wine. Karos was still puzzled, whispering to Beatrice, remarked how easily the goblins submitted. The goblin offered Karos a bunch of fruits, urging him to enjoy. Beatrice, feeling superior, said that it's only natural for them to submit to her power. The goblin chief leader offered to guide them through the village. Beatrice approved and followed. Kato also followed them, doubting anything would happen. At this moment, he discovered that the camp of the goblins was quite large. With the size, he concludes it should be considered a top-tier monster camp. Karos noticed a large crack in the village walls as they roamed and asked the chief about it. Nervously, the chief explained an ogre had rampaged but was subdued. Karos, sensing something wrong, knowing that there was an overwhelming difference in power between goblins and ogres and that even 100 goblins weren't enough to deal with a single ogre. With a rattled face, he then called Beatrice and told her to discard her drink, but then Beatrice said that she had already finished it. They then noticed 3 goblins ready to attack them. Karos, alarmed, shouted to Beatrice to use her magic to wipe them out. Beatrice stood very confident while trying to activate her magic power, but then she found out it wasn't working. She was dumbfounded, wondering why her magic power disappeared. Next to her, Karos felt a wave of anxiety. His eyes widened in shock as he saw the goblins charging toward them. At that moment, both Karos and Beatrice felt a pang of fear. They were not used to being outmatched, and now they faced a potentially deadly situation. Meanwhile, the air was thick with moisture in the dark, damp cave, creating a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. Beatrice was unconscious, but then she woke up when there was a little water dumped on her head. She slowly opened her eyes and found herself bound tightly with thick, coarse ropes. She panicked and tried to struggle against the restraints. Her voice echoed through the cave as she shouted to release her. Just as the echoes of her voice began to fade, a familiar voice cut through the darkness and told her that it was useless. She saw Karos sitting just behind her, similarly tied up. She was shocked because the protagonist was behind her. Karos concludes that she should understand what happens when she stubbornly insists on her own way. Beaticia's initial shock faded into a mix of guilt and frustration. She lowered her head and didn't give any words, knowing that it was really her fault. Suddenly, the cave was illuminated by a massive fire that blazed to life. The sudden brightness revealed a group of goblins advancing toward them. Beatrice, her eyes wide with anger, believing that she could easily wipe out these goblins if she could still use her magic power. That's the point, Beatrice, Karos said, which only confused the lady. As per Karos, goblins think simply, so he believes there is no way goblins planned this. He's certain that another demon king is behind this. Beatrice, still processing his words, then asked who would be that demon king. Karos then replied that there were too many potential suspects. Even if Lilith had noticed something was amiss, he believed it would be impossible for her to come to them alone. Beatrice felt a surge of helplessness, asking him what they should do. Karos remained calm and said that they could only watch and wait for now. The chief of the goblins was also inside the cave and proudly claimed that he was the goblin who overpowered demon kings. The words struck a nerve, and Beatrice's face flushed with anger. "Just wait and see," she shouted, her voice echoing through the cave. The force of her outburst sent two goblins running away in fear, their laughter turning into frightened cries. Beatrice's eyes burned with fury as she watched the two goblins flee. 1 day, 2 days, time passed. On the 3rd day, Beatrice, weary and leaning against Karos for support, broke the silence. Then Beatrice starts asking Karos why he did that to her when they were students. Karos then asked her what she meant to say. "Why are you acting clueless? I am talking about what happened at the academy. Why did you bully me then?" Beatrice said. Karos stared at her, his brow furrowed, and he responded, telling the lady that he didn't bully her. Beatrice said he was the one who spread those outrageous rumors. Beatrice accused, scratching her feet against the rough ground in agitation. "Rumors? What rumors?" Karos responded, his confusion deepening. Beatrice's expression went blank for a moment before she exploded. "Don't act dumb," she shouted to Karos. Karos flinched at the intensity of her outburst. She said that she already knew Karos was the one who spread the rumor that she was the daughter of a brothel owner. Beatrice's voice shook with fury and betrayal. As she spoke, a flashback of their academy days played in her mind. She remembered the good times she had with Karos. She thought at that time that they were friends, but then she felt she was betrayed, believing that it was Karos who spread such rumors about her. "You knew how hard that time was for me, you son of a bitch," Beatrice said with anger. Karos listened, his heart heavy with guilt he didn't understand. He says sorry to Beatrice, but he says with conviction that this is the first time he heard about it. Beatrice stared at him, her anger still simmering. "What?" she asked. Then, a spark of realization flickered in Karos's eyes. He understood now, he muttered, a small smile of revelation on his lips. The atmosphere in the cave grew tense as the goblins parted, making way for their chief. He approached with a menacing grin. He commanded his minions to bring the demon king Karos with them. A goblin minion stepped forward and swiftly chained Karos. Beatrice couldn't contain her confusion and anger. "What? Why are you only calling for him?" she asked. "It's the master's will," the goblin replied. In the middle of a field, a small greenhouse stood, its quaint appearance contrasting with the eerie blue light surrounding it. Towering trees loomed in the background, their branches swaying gently in an otherworldly breeze. Karos stood before a curtain, with the two goblins standing beside him. The goblins then instructed him to greet their master. In the middle of the room stands a big, detailed pedestal holding a glowing crystal ball. It shimmered with a magical purple light, surrounded by an ancient magical aura. Tiny lights, like stars, floated around it, making it even more mysterious. Someone said hello, "It has been a while." A voice emanated from the crystal ball. "It has, Borkinia Barcelov," Karos replied, looking down at the crystal ball. The crystal ball began to form an image of a woman with long, flowing purple hair seated regally upon her throne. It turned out that this person was the demon king of treachery and deceit. Borkinia chuckled softly. "How did he find out?" she asked, feigning surprise while resting her hands on her cheeks, smiling at Karos. Karos's eyes hardened, and asked Borkinia what she wanted from him. "He's sure there's something she's after since she had gone this far." "Nothing much," Borkinia said with a casual smile. "The only thing she wants from Karos is to persuade his subordinate Beatrice and send her to her." Her fangs gleamed as she spoke. Karos's eyes widened in confusion while uttering Beatrice's name. The crystal ball's image shifted unexpectedly to reveal Beatrice, who was sitting alone and tied up in the dark cave. Borkinia continued to speak, saying that her goal was to get rid of Treacherous. Borkinia's expression turned mad at the mention of Treacherous, proclaiming that Treacherous is currently after her territory. Karos remembers that Treacherous was one of the 4 most powerful demon kings. Borkinia believes that it would be impossible for her to face Treacherous alone, but she was sure it would be enough if she would join hands with Beatrice. She was aware that Beatrice's power was famous for being strong and loyal. Karos then replies that Beatrice might have lost her power as a demon king since she's now her subordinate. Karos thought that if they relied solely on Beatrice's influence, her territory would crumble. Ultimately, her subordinates will lose trust in her and leave her. The image of Beatrice being alone appeared in his mind. Borkinia asks him about what he thinks, and she assures Karos that he won't lose anything. If he does this favor, she will give him as many monsters as he wants. Moreover, when Beatrice loses all her influence, Borkinia believes that Beatrice will become quiet and remain a subordinate to Karos forever. Karos's smile faded into a playful chuckle. "All right, Borkinia," he said, his voice light with amusement. But in an instant, his expression shifted, his eyes narrowing with intensity as he stared directly at Borkinia while rejecting her offer. Borkinia's face registered mad, her brows furrowing slightly. Borkinia asked him why, her face laced with genuine confusion and anger. Karos smiled and said he had a few principles by which he lived, and one of them was to protect his subordinates. Besides, when accomplishing something, he prefers to do it with his strength rather than resorting to despicable acts. And after hearing the filthy rumors about Beatrice, he definitely can't accept Borkinia's suggestion. Borkinia stares angrily at him as she feels insulted by what he just said. Right now, Karos realizes that it was Borkinia who spread the rumor that Beatrice is the daughter of a dirty brothel owner, and frames him as the culprit to cause him and Beatrice to grow distant. "Well, that's enough about the past," she said with a hint of sarcasm. She understands his intentions and calls him to his title, Demon King Karos. The crystal ball suddenly unleashed a chaotic display of black, purple, and lightning, swirling into a massive tornado of energy. Borkinia said Karos had chosen to die a lonely death in this goblin cave. Borkinia called the chief of the goblins. The goblin chief stepped forward and heard Borkinia commanding him to kill Karos. With a frightening appearance, the chief goblin responded immediately, "Understood, master." His eyes glowed ominously red, showing his unwavering loyalty and readiness for violence. With a low, fierce growl, he gripped a long, jagged sword that glinted threateningly in the dim light, aiming it straight at Karos. Karos stood composed amid the rising tension, meeting the goblin's stare without any trace of fear. A slight, self-assured smile crossed his lips as he readied himself for the coming battle. Upon hearing and knowing that he would be eliminated by the goblin that ordered from Borkinia, he smiled and said that there was something that the woman overlooked, and that is his power as a demon king. He proudly showed the green slime and threw it together with the different colors to the goblins. When he released the different colors of slimes, he got flashbacks where he carefully looked at them and wanted to be assured that they were not completely useless. He caresses his chin and looks at the slime, and he hears Lilith inform him that the slime has a volume reduction ability. When he heard Lilith's assurance, he started holding the green one and thought they might fit into something like his pocket. He was about to try it, however, all the slimes went into his pocket together. The slime's actions didn't fit Karos's liking. He covered his eyes, massaged his temple, and tried to look at the slimes inside his pocket. Then, he was surprised when he saw the slimes became a coin figure. As he finished reminiscing, the hand of the goblin was captivated by the green slime. Even the foot of the goblin was tied. Karos was laughing when he saw the goblin being embraced by his slime, unproceeded to ask if the goblin liked the taste of the slime. The goblin pleaded that he didn't want to be eliminated, and the tears of the goblin could be seen. He also said that he would serve Karos as his master as long as he released him. Borkinia heard the goblin plead through the purple ball of crystal. She cursed the goblin and angrily said that she would eliminate him. Karos heard the threat from the other demon master, interrupted her, and said that the relationship formed by threats was fragile. The goblin was shocked by his statement, while Borkinia told Karos that he should not be ridiculous because there were still countless goblins out there. Despite the threats he received from the woman, he just smiled and asked her if the plan would still go as she thought. His answer provoked the woman, and she called the goblins and said their master had ordered them to kill the demon king and the village chief. When the woman saw that the goblins were not doing anything, she repeated her command. The reflection of the feet of Karos could be seen on the crystal ball, and he said to use the goblins. She needs to understand their nature because they only listen to the representative, which is the village chief. Karos claimed that the chief was now on his side. He then asked the captivated goblin if what he just said was right. The goblin, surrounded by the different colors of slimes, was hesitant to answer. Karos then commanded the chief to lead him to the antidote, and the goblin easily agreed. However, Orkinia already knew the answer. The goblin had chosen Karos as his master. Therefore, she had gone mad and broken the purple crystal ball. On the other hand, inside the cave, where Beatrice was tied and left alone, she started to wonder if Karos was already dead. She remembered the words that Karos uttered earlier when they were talking, stating that Karos apologized, yet it was his first time hearing those rumors. Still, Beatrice didn't believe Karos and called him a liar. She remembered her upbringing at Pantania, a village in a desert known for gathering trash, and it could be seen that there was a boy and an older man who was just there. The red-haired little girl was Beatrice, born as the daughter of a low-class prostitute. Her mother earned money while getting beaten almost every day, and crying while kneeling in front of a man. They were one of those so-called dirt poor. They were sharing a piece of bread, yet they were happier than anyone else. When she was somewhat grown, her red hair grew long. She happily walked inside their house and joyfully called her mother. However, it changed immediately to tears when he saw a multiple group of men that were holding a weapon that had blood on it. She crawled to her mother, who was lying with bruises and blood. Her only family, her mother, just died. As she was crying, a man called her, and they said that Beatrice had a pretty face and that they should have some fun before they sold her off. By then, she was surrounded by the man, and one of them said they agreed to the proposition of their companion. It all began when she discovered she had a magical power because she was mad at them. She releases her purple power, making all the house's men die. After that, she walked outside the house and roamed the village. She was held by two men wearing suits, and many people surrounded them. The man said that they said her magical power was so strong that someone with it only appeared once every 10 years. The other one pinpointed the little girl that they were holding. A blonde man and a white-haired woman were seen, and the man said that at that moment, the red-haired little girl, kneeling in front of them, would be named Beatrice Confrescia. She would become their adopted daughter and attend the academy. Her adoptive father reached for her hand. After she was adopted, she started going to the academy. However, she was still all alone, and she heard her classmates asking her if she was the adopted daughter of the Confrescia family. And that is the reason why some girls wanted to get along with her. She shrugged it off and just walked past. Inside their classroom, she thought that having the title of a prestigious family, everyone's attitude changed except for one. She looked at the boy inside her classroom and thought this boy wasn't from a prestigious family and climbed up on his own. She then claims that the boy might be in a similar situation as hers. That boy was none other than Karos. Beatrice was picking a fight with Karos, which only made Karos mad and asked her why she was doing it. Beatrice widely smiled at him and replied that it was because he was ugly. That was how Karos and she became genuine friends, or just as she thought, the closeness shattered like glass. She heard that her classmates already knew that she was from Pantania, and they also knew that she was the daughter of a low-class prostitute. From that, she became an outsider. Because of what she heard, her soul became dark, as did the place. Someone held her hand, and it was a girl named Orkinia. Orkinia asked her if she was fine after Karos spread a rumor about her. When Beatrice heard it, she was in disbelief as she never thought Karos had done it. She froze at that moment. She approached Karos and asked him if he really did it. But then, Karos asked her what she meant, and at that time, he thought that the lady was referring to the magic rampage incident, which is why he said, "Why ask now?" Of course, I did. After remembering Beatrice's past, she just smiled, asking herself why she would reminisce about the past if Karos would still die. She looked to the pathway of the cave and madly screamed, "You're here. Just kill me quickly, you bastards," as she thought that there were goblins staring at her. However, beside her feet, someone dropped a chemical bottle in front of her, and it uttered that she should not say harsh words and wanted her to drink the chemical inside the bottle. It was the chief's village goblin and the demon king Karos. The woman was surprised and stuttered while she asked Karos how he made the village chief be under his command. The protagonist just told her that there were ways. He then started untying Beatrice, and at the same time, he explained that it was Orkinia who had spread the rumors about her. The woman side-eyed him as if she heard it right. The source of the strange rumors wasn't me, it was her, Karos said once again. Beatrice, who looks like her soul, left her body when she heard about the rumor. She was blank, and her tears dripped from the chemical bottle. Her tears were continuously dripping while she still could not utter words. Karos was in front of her, and he stretched his hand so that Beatrice could reach it. He convinced the woman not to misunderstand and just returned to the Demon King's castle together. After they went outside the cave, the view was clearer and a bird could be seen flying around the house. They were finally home, and Karos was tired. He sat on the chair, leaning his back, saying that this place was the best. Lilith brought a tea for him, and she was glad that Karos had returned safely. She eyed the goblin and asked Karos if he would take that goblin as his subordinate. The protagonist answered that he would take the goblin as his subordinate since there were about 200 goblins under the village chief. He believes that those goblins could be employed as a special force if it was used well. He put both hands behind his head, yawned, and said that at that moment, the goblin would live with them in the Demon King's castle, so he obliged her secretary to take care of the goblin. Lilith just agreed with what his master had said. As Karos was resting, he heard someone calling his name, and then he opened his left eye to see whoever it was. He saw Beatrice was standing there, couldn't look straight at him, and said she wanted to talk to him. The two of them went to the rooftop, and Karos asked what it was all about. At the same time, he was wondering what would Beatrice plans to say right now. Beatrice was murmuring the name of Borkinia Barcelov. She honestly said that she thought Borkinia was her true friend, but unfortunately she didn't. She suddenly kneels in front of Karos while apologizing for doubting him based on Borkinia's words so blindly. At the same time, when kneeling, the latter is surprised by the woman's action. Beatrice, who was still kneeling in front of the Demon King Karos, finally accepted that she was a loyal subordinate of Karos and she vowed to follow all of his orders. Beatrice's action towards the latter signifies that it was the ceremony and tradition of becoming the Demon King's subordinate. The fact that the woman is pledging her own will means she acknowledges Karos as her superior. Karos scratches the side of his head and agrees to the woman's pledge, but a part of him feels awkward thinking that it is unsettling that Beatrice changed her attitude so suddenly. The woman was happy when Karos accepted her and answered by saying, "Yes, as you wish." After talking on the rooftop, they returned inside the castle. All of them were there, including the succubus that he got in the box. As they gathered around, Beatrice asked her master what he would do now, and she wanted to know if Karos had a plan to attack another village after subduing the goblins. Karos sipped a little of his tea while he replied that there is something they needed to do before anything else. That made Beatrice startled, and she asked what it would be. Karos crosses his legs and turns to ask her once more if he would really get a special ability once completing the task. Lilith then said he was correct. However, she wasn't sure if Karos wouldn't like it. On the feet of the master, the yellow and green slime appeared, and they were looking intently at their master. "What is it? It can't be worse than it is now, right? Just tell me," Karos said. Lilith pointed her finger into the air, and there was a blinding light appeared together with a purple dark magic emerging. Seemed like Lilith was tapping something like an interface. After that, a purple portal appeared right in front of them, and Lilith asked Karos to step inside. Karos was shocked upon realizing that it was a subspace. He went inside the subspace, and his two subordinates followed. When they were all walking inside, Karos observed the color was terribly tacky, and he wondered what was the purpose of this place. At first, he assumed that it was just storage. Lilith positioned his hands to point something in front of them and told Karos to look over there. A big screen appeared with the number 3222. Karos was confused about the numbers because it didn't seem familiar to him. He asked what it was and held a box with 100 carves. At the same time, the woman explained to him that he could purchase those draw boxes using the points displayed on the scoreboard. He held the box with carved on it, believing that it cost 100 points. He started wondering because the rest were empty. The secretary continued to explain that the Great Demon King said that once something interesting happened, he would gradually fill the rest. Because of that, Karos got annoyed, then asked if it meant that they could only buy 32 of these at that moment. Her secretary said that he was correct. The protagonist throws the box in once to buy all of the boxes. "Who knows when the rest will be added anyway," he uttered. After they purchased all the boxes, they went outside the subspace together with the purchased boxes. As they stuck up the boxes, they were all gathered around it, and Karos wanted to open them individually. He held one box with curiosity and immediately opened it. As he looked inside it, a yellow aura was releasing. It was so bright that it released a blinding light, making him close both of his eyes. As he took a peek, he wondered what was inside the box. It was so bright because there was a good-looking crystal inside the box, and Beatrice then said it was a divine orbrion. Beatrice explained that it was a dangerous mineral that could inflict fatal wounds just by touching it, and she also thought that it disappeared 1,000 years ago, so she wondered why it was here right now. Karos was shocked, asking her if it was precious. The woman answered her by saying yes and added that it was way more powerful than expected. Upon hearing it, Karos was happy and said they sealed it in the box for now while opening the rest. As they open all the boxes, he asks her members to fill in what they have received from the box. There was an old, worn-out sword, wood, and a rusty shield. Karos was annoyed with the things they had drawn. He saw Beatrice was holding a knife and thought that nothing as useful as he expected. That was nothing useful. He expected that there were no useful things. He proceeded to ask about how many boxes were left. Her secretary held the box and stated that there were 2 boxes left. As they opened the box, they looked inside, confused about it. Karos felt disgusted, saying that it smelled weird. Inside the box, there were rotten tangerines. Karos was disappointed in all the boxes that he purchased. He crouched on the side and said that all the boxes were trash. However, the succubus looked intently inside the box and stated it wasn't trash. She was carefully holding a necklace she got from the last box, observing it. Karos stares at her, asking her what it is. After carefully observing the necklace, succubus said that the necklace was to block magic. As Beatrice heard it, she wore it and tried to acknowledge that she could not feel any magic at all. Karos was surprised and said that it was quite useful. Karos put his hand on his chin and started thinking about 32 drawers of boxes, and he got a magic blocking necklace and a Brion ore. He also thinks it might not be as bad of a deal as he thought. For now, he wanted to clean up the mess inside his room. As he kept thinking, the 2 girls behind him were arguing because succubus wanted to try the necklace, and Beatrice wasn't allowing the younger. Karos started to clean, and he was holding a sack of something, planning to throw it away. But then, Lilith stopped him and said to wait momentarily, which confused him. Inside the sack is full of money, and Lilith asks if she could have it instead of throwing it away. Karen was confused because it was money from the human world, which means it cannot be used in their world. Before her secretary answered him, she looked away and said she wanted to buy some apples because it was in season. Karos couldn't explain his reaction because of what he heard from her secretary. Afterward, he said yes, and she permitted her secretary to buy apples. It doesn't matter because he was planning to visit a human village soon to scout the first target. After a few days, Karos went to the human world, hiding in the middle of the grass. Karos was confused because the 2 were following him again. Beatrice asked what a powerless demon king could do on his own, so it was better if they accompanied him if something happened without her nullifying the magic. Karen has given up and just permitted them to follow him, saying that he understands the woman. His attention drew to succubus, and he asked the younger one why she was also coming. The younger one was surprised and explained that she hadn't had her coming-of-age ceremony yet, so she didn't have any magic. She proudly pointed her horn and said that she could hide it together with her wings. Karos didn't say anything, just warned them not to cause any trouble. The village was in front of them as they hid in the grass. His subordinate acknowledged the warning from Karos by saying yes. As they were still hidden in the grass, Karos gave his subordinate a cloth and commanded them to wear it. Beatrice was thoroughly looking at it, while the succubus was amused upon accepting it. Karos wore a hoodie because they were almost close to the village. They went on the pathway of the village as they walked near the gate of the town. Karos noticed succubus and he asked the younger if she couldn't do something about the thing on her head. The younger girl was emotionless and took off her hoodie. By that, the green slimes were lying on her head. She said she'd like to, but the slime brother felt cramped and wanted to come out. The green slime was stubborn and angry. Karos heard and saw everything, and he was surprised when the slime could talk. Karos then went near the succubus, and he put back her hoodie. Beatrice then realizes that the ones Karos could summon can communicate with each other. Succubus was frowning because of Karos, and she immediately changed. She pointed and instructed his leader and Beatrice that they had arrived in the village. As they observed, they were amused by how big the town was before they could finally enter. A guy with clothes full of warrior clothes was the guard at the place. He stopped them and said that the place was Barterak territory and wanted to know what their business was to their village. Karos then explained that they were just adventurers, looking and traveling for a long time and exhausted. He added that, after a long trip, they would like to rest in their village for a while. The village guard wanted to see their ID. Before Karos could react, Beatrice quickly went to the side of the protagonist and said that it was their ID. However, the woman is cunning and uses her power to hypnotize the village guard. Right after what she did, the guard welcomed them and she just smiled. When they passed through the village guards, they walked inside the village. And Karos realized that it wasn't that easy. As they walked and lingered inside the town, they were amused because of how spacious the village was. Several people could be seen who were displaying their peddled products. Beatrice couldn't stay still. She looked at everything because it was pretty splendid. Karos notices that the life of the people living in the village doesn't seem bad, but their public sentiment doesn't look great. Upon hearing Karos, she stopped and looked at her master and asked about how he could tell. The different types of best vegetables were filled up, each with a vegetable container. Karos said that the food stores were bustling, and it was clear that they didn't have a problem making a living. They both looked in the same direction, where they saw the young boy buying food. Karos continued that while the children look happy, the adults look grim, which tells a lot. As they proceeded to walk, Beatrice looked away and agreed to the latter. When they keep lingering about the village, Succubus bumps into the boy who seems the same as her age. They both grunted because of what happened. The boy was quick to apologize to the succubus. However, Beatrice became protective of their youngest and got mad at the boy. She asked the boy how dare he bump into Succubus. Karos was startled and blocked the woman using his body and uttered she shouldn't take it out on the child. He wanted to let him go, and Beatrice was shocked about his actions. Simultaneously, the boy was trembling and feared the woman. As Karos still blocked the woman, he mumbled to the boy that he was free to go. The boy bowed down while the woman was annoyed with her master. Beatrice became grumpy, elbowed Karos, and asked why he had let the boy go. Karen just told her that she needed to work on her temper. The succubus suddenly ran and stopped them in their wrangle. She enthusiastically pointed at the fruit stand. As they looked at the fruit stall afar, there was a man who seemed like the vendor of the fruits. Before they walked near it, Karos reminded the two in advance that they should keep their mouths shut no matter what he said over the fruit stall. Succubus happily agreed while Beatrice was still frowning, retorted, and asked if she was a child, then snubbed Karos. They continued to walk near the fruit stall as they arrived. Karos then noticed that the apples were well ripened. The vendor acknowledged him, saying that he had a good eye for fruits. He also said the year's harvest was great, so the apples were delicious. When Karos felt good about the vendor, he proceeded and whispered to ask about the village atmosphere because it felt strangely uneasy for him. As the vendor held the apples they had bought, he looked back and forth and whispered his answer. He said that it was because of their lord in the village. Karos was confused and asked about their lord. The old man answered that a new lord recently took over their territory. It looks like their lord had a red-haired guy, and he continued that the reviews weren't great because they knew how arrogant the nobles could be. He also whispered that there were rumors that their lord imprisoned a lady who originally lived in the castle. Karos was startled by what he heard from the vendor and why it happened. The vendor handed a grocery bag with the apples they had bought inside. He answered that he didn't know because they never get along well to begin with. When Karos reached for the grocery bag from the old man, he stated that it was an interesting story and thought it might just be a rumor but worth looking into. He then turned to Succubus and asked the younger to give her the money pouch. However, the younger girl was dumbfounded, saying that she didn't have the money. Beatrice grabbed the younger into her collar and was furiously asked what nonsense Succubus blabbered. The younger explained that she didn't have it and pointed out that the kid who bumped into her earlier took the money pouch. All of them, including the vendor, were looking at each other. On the other side, the boy who bumped into Succubus kept looking behind him and going into the street. The street was full of gangsters, and all the men were bald and holding equipment. The man who was seated asked the boy if he was back and what his today's haul was. The boy went to the bald man, holding a pouch. The bald man took it and looked inside. It was full of money. He praised the kid for stealing so much money, and they called the kid number 3. The gangsters celebrated because of the thick money. On the other hand, the boy thought he was thankful because he wouldn't get hit that day. However, the other gangster grabbed the boy's hair and ordered him to return to those people where he got the thick money. The boy feels the pain in his hair and asks the gangster what it is. Then, the gangsters explain that the travelers where the kid stole the money might be wealthy travelers, so they wanted the kid to go back and beg or cry and do whatever he could to get more money. The big guy clenched his fist, intending to punch the kid. The kid closed his eyes in fear, thinking that he would be beaten up harshly again. All of a sudden, someone said that the guys don't use good stuff based on their smell. The bad guys then looked at the person who suddenly came, asking who she was, and it turned out that it was Beatrice telling them that they were meeting again. Of course, she was together with Karos and the succubus, and they were standing behind the kneeling boy. One of the gangsters went near the woman, and she found that Beatrice had a rare beauty, and he said that Beatrice was brave enough to come to their territory to pick a fight. The woman didn't say anything. He just grabbed the face of the gangster and released her power, the dark purple lightning. She then aims at the gangster and lets the man fly above her. The gangster fell to the ground and instantly lost consciousness, and the woman tapped the body of the man and said that he was too lustful and was also a fool. She demanded and wanted to get the money that the boy stole. The young boy who watched all the happenings was surprised, and behind him, there were a lot of gangsters who wanted to attack the woman. Another man came in and had a full tattoo on his body. He cursed and asked what kind of woman did and why they were barging into someone else's business. The man also said that they wouldn't give up the money without a fight. He then commanded his other companion, and the three were surrounded by all the gangsters inside the street, all of them holding a piece of metal. Beatrice sighed, questioning herself about how long she could have to put up with this kind of fight. Karos answered that he didn't think that they had to, and the woman lazily asked him if he was sure about what he said. Succubus was watching while the green slime was filled with anger at the moment. As the youngest stood up on the wall, it seemed like the cue for the slimes to attack the several gangsters who cornered his master and Beatrice. The two slimes stick to the enemies' faces, and the bad guys are feeling gross because of the stickiness of the slimes. As the three watched the slimes, someone said it was her chance to show her skills. Succubus guessed that the slime brothers were getting frustrated. The slime bit the money pouch, and Beatrice noticed that the slimy creature had found the money. A young boy looked scared and was about to leave the scene. However, Karos' hand held the young boy's shoulder and asked him where he was going. He froze at that moment and was screaming for help. Karos stood in front of the boy who was terrified of him. Karos then asks if the boy knows someone in the village. The boy was stuttering and ended up speechless. Karos then suddenly questioned him about his parents or if he was an orphan good. He was looking for the boy's parents, and the boy answered that he was an orphan. Karos then approached Beatrice and ordered her to take the boy to his castle and treat him. The woman was startled and retorted that they would not eliminate the boy. Karos explained to the boy that they would provide him with plenty of food and a warm place to sleep. It made the boy happy, and he asked if the latter was sure about his words. Karos just had some prepositions to the boy and told him that he should make a deal with him in exchange. He asked the boy if he would accept his preposition and wanted to reach the boy's hand. The boy agreed and held his hand. After they sealed the deal with their hands, the yellow power of the Demon King was released, and the boy lost consciousness. After receiving the urgent call, the village chief rushed to take the boy to the Demon King's castle. He also brought dire news. Ogres had awakened and started devouring everything, and he desperately sought Karos' help. Tears streamed down his face as he pleaded for assistance. Meanwhile, Beatrice and Karos roamed the dense woods in the heart of the forest. "It's so annoying. Why do the ogres have to awaken again?" Beatrice complained, her frustration evident as she walked with a stick. "Stop complaining and tell her to let's go," Karos replied curtly. Beatrice then suddenly asked Karos why he let the boy stay alive. Her face showed her confusion. Karos looked back at her and said, "Many demon kings have tried to take over human villages by force. But for him, he wanted to take a different route." "A different route?" Beatrice inquired. Karos continued, saying that he would sow discord from within the empire and slowly grow in size. He was sure that it's not always the external enemies that kill a giant, but its system. As he spoke, he created an illusion of an empire in his hand. To do his plans, he needs a few humans on his side. Beatrice, still confused, asked if he needed to since he had an option to just wipe the humans out by force. After a few minutes of talking, they arrived at Ogre Cave, surrounded by leaves, ready to confront the threat within. At the same time, the succubus flew casually above the streets in a peaceful human village. She noticed some accessories and exclaimed, "Shiny." Ready to swoop down, she was distracted by something shining from a castle window. Intrigued, she approached the window, but it was barred. "I'll take the jewelry to the Demon King. He'll be happy," she uttered. Peering through the bars, she spotted a white-haired woman inside. Both were surprised to see each other. The white-haired woman asked who she was. The succubus, equally startled, asked if she could see her. The woman looked at her directly and replied yes. The succubus muttered to herself she should be invisible. The concerned white-haired woman said she doesn't know how she got here, but it's not safe for a child as young as her to be there. The lady then asked the succubus to go back quickly before someone saw her. "Go away as far as you can," she added and suddenly walked away. The succubus, bewildered, muttered, "Such a strange human." Then she remembered her mission and said she had come to get something. Back at the Demon King's castle, Lilith, while eating an apple, asked Karos if he already took over the Ogre Cave. Beatrice, leaning on the table, listened as Karos, sipping his tea, replied that it took less than 3 minutes to capture the ogres. Beatrice added that there were no problems and she felt so proud. Recalling their plans, Lilith asked about when they planned to return to the human village. Karos stood up, looking at a map of the human village. He said he needed to do something about that, pointing at the map. As he said, they must let them destroy themselves without their interference. "How?" Lilith asked. Karos tore the map apart, saying that it would be by organizing an internal rebellion led by the nobles. Lilith's eyes widened in realization. Then, it would be perceived as a territorial battle, not a rebellion. Bingo, Karos confirmed, pleased that she understood. He stroked his chin thoughtfully. But where can they find a noble to join them? Beatrice remembered something. She remembered the merchant telling them about a young woman who was called a lady. If she exists as rumored, they might be able to get some help. Karos nudged Beatrice teasingly and said, he sees Beatrice's all the help he needs. Beatrice's face remained blank, her irritation growing. Karos then instructed her to wake him up. They would ask him something. They turn their attention to the unconscious boy, ready to interrogate him for more information. In the office of Karos, he sits in his chair, confronting the guy kneeling before him. Karos asks the guy his name, and the boy replies that his name is Jacob. Smiling, Karos asks Jacob if he knows anything about the former lord's daughter in their village. According to Jacob, the lady was named Irina Astrea, and she was probably in her 20s. She was a beautiful woman with silver hair and golden eyes. Jacob remembers how she was well liked by everyone because she cared about the poor villagers and was a rare kind noble. Suddenly, Jacob stops talking as he remembers something. Succubus says she has silver hair and golden eyes, and she thinks she knows who she is. The scene shifts to a cell room where Irina sits, with food on the floor and a guard nearby. The guard asks Irina if she is all right. Approaching the food, Irina says that she is fine and this is not the first time she has had a meal like this, adding that the Lord's orders are orders he needs to follow while looking at the bread. The guard kneels and lowers his head, asking how it ended like this while holding the cell door where Irina is imprisoned. Irina, who is chained up while holding the bread, says that she is the eldest daughter with no right to succession and is about to be sold, so it's natural. The guard looks at her and says that her brother is now on a rampage, drinking free alcohol in the village on fictitious holidays, breaking things if he doesn't like them, and dragging innocent women away just for one night's pleasure. An image of her brother with guards behind him holding a woman flashes in Irina's mind, and gritting her teeth, holding herself, Irina hears the guards say it would have been better if Irina had become the lord rather than her brother. Irina stands up, turns her back to the guard, and tells him to go back, warning that he won't be safe if he stays too long. The guard follows her advice and starts leaving. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you wish to have another part of this recap, please give us at least 2,000 likes. Please don't forget to comment and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Until next time.